Hi everyone. So I'm from the Joint Program of Survey Methodology at the University of Maryland, and what is in your agenda is not what I will present, but what I will present was in your read-aheads. So if you read, you will hopefully know what we're going to talk about now. So the title of this paper is An Offer of Control Over Data That's Shared with Researchers with the goal to reduce non-participation in a passive data collection. This was an experiment I ran as part of my dissertation that has yet to be defended, so feedback and comments are highly welcome. So a bit of background, I don't think I need to spend much time on this slide, but everyone in this room is aware that social science research has been shifting towards digital research methods that allows for more direct observation of participant behaviors and environments, and this is in place of self-report information. There's many benefits and opportunities that's offered through the use of passive data collection. It may be impossible to collect such data, and so through self-reports, certainly it could be less measurement error, less burden, and such passive data collection can be linked to other self-reported data. But there's large concerns coming up in the literature that privacy is a barrier to participation. For this work in particular, I'm going to be focused on what's coming up in the open responses here, that participants may feel they do not have much control over what is ultimately shared with researchers. And I think we've heard this a little bit throughout the day, but for this work I want to say that when we're inviting participants to a passive data collection that are already part of a panel, a survey panel, those participants may have this sense about what control they have over self-reported survey data. They can choose not to answer a certain question. They could lie about their response, but in a passive data collection environment where the data is just streamed from their phone to the researcher, that control is lost. So in this work, I'm going to be referring to non-participation as the refusal to consent or to take actions to share data after an invitation has been made. And that control here is really giving participants the ability to decide what data is shared with researchers at the end of the day. And I'll be looking at two different points of time that data control can be given. First is preemptive, second is reactive. And preemptive is control over data that's offered before the data is collected, allowing participants to temporarily turn off the data collection. The literature has shown some positive impacts with this offer. However, that's been in studies that are in asking participants their willingness to participate in a hypothetical study, not in an actual study, which is what my paper will present here. It's also interesting to me, and I'll note this now, that participants already do have this control in a way, particularly if you're talking about studies that are going to track location. A participant may simply turn their phone off or leave it in a different location if they don't want to be tracked. Control they already have, they don't need to be given. Reactive control, on the other hand, is control that's given after data is collected by allowing participants to edit the data to choose what is shared. And the two papers that have explored this work have found mixed findings. And we can talk about that a little bit more, but the one paper that showed no impact to this offer was a study that was presented as hypothetical, and the other one that did show a positive impact of an offer of control. This offer of control was an actual sharing of geolocation, and that's going to be replicated in my study here. And then along that, I'll also offer both a preemptive and reactive control over data to see how that impacts. I do want to point out that both of these time points also have different levels of burden that's associated with them. And burden here, I'm defining it as simply the number of interactions that the participant has with the data collection tool, along with their own comfort with using such a tool. So in the preemptive space, participants asked to think about their actions in real time and interact with that tool in real time. But that leads to the question of what happens if I just forget? What control do I have now? There potentially is none. In a reactive environment, the participant goes about their normal day and then only interacts with the tool once, and that's to edit or delete data. But then there's this concern potentially of what if this is not true and what I have already shared has just gone to the researcher without my ability to edit it. So as a measure of burden, in the study here, I asked respondents whether their ability to complete a task on a phone. I asked about their comfort with installing new apps And I asked if they were very comfortable, comfortable, or not comfortable, and I dichotomized this then to not comfortable as a 0 and comfortable and very comfortable as a 1. And then a measure of privacy, which we know is a barrier to participation. I took this from the panel household survey, and I'll talk about that in my next slide. But this is just simply asking how concerned you are about providing personal information over the internet. Not concerned, slightly concerned, somewhat concerned, or very concerned. And again, I just dichotomized this, splitting it out to those that are not concerned and those that have any level of concern. That leads to my research questions. I'll just quickly state them here. That first, does any offer of control improve participation in this will be a mobile app-based passive data collection? Then does offering sample members both preemptive and reactive control, so both timings, does that increase participation more than just one? And then finally, does burden and, or privacy concerns impact which control is preferred? For this research, I utilized a web survey with an invitation to a passive data collection at the end. This was a very short survey. I think it took just over 2 minutes on average for the responses. This was a fully cross-factorial design experiment with 4 levels of control. I'll show the invitation on the next slide, but respondents were given no control, and that was just a blank page. The offer of preemptive control, reactive control, or both on the same page. In total, I had 570 respondents to this survey. GFK Knowledge Panel was how I recruited these respondents. So this is an address-based, probability-based panel that is run by GFK, now acquired by Ipsos. Through a lot of begging and pleading, they did sponsor me, so I appreciate their efforts and support greatly. This was a deception survey, so I asked a few questions about use of their smartphone, followed by the invitation to the passive data collection, and at the end, whether they agreed or did not agree to participate, they were debriefed immediately. This was unfortunately 2 screens of information about how I had deceived them in the earlier parts of this study. So unfortunately, I did see quite a number. I saw 79 respondents withdraw their data completely from the study, and that was pretty even across experiments, so I'm not too worried about that, but it did, reduce my sample size. So the invitation was actually across 2 pages of the web survey, or the smartphone-based survey. The first, at the top, you see page 1. It just laid out the invitation itself. Would you like to participate in this study on where Americans use their smartphones? It was described the incentive that they would receive, $10 at the start, $10 at the end, and it was a week-long study in which their location would be tracked once an hour. And then there's an image, and that's my house, of what you would see if this was to be captured once an hour. And then on the second page is where the actual experiment was. Everyone received this first bullet that said, your data will remain anonymous and you'll never be used in any way to personally identify you. Then you either receive both of those preemptive or reactive controls or just one of those. And you can see the little image in between those. The preemptive control experiment said that the data collection can be turned off, and there was a little toggle to show you how to do it. Or at the end of the week, you would receive this shot of all the pictures, and you could just go through and edit and delete what you wanted to. So at the end of the day, I saw extremely high participation rate overall to this invitation, which was higher than I expected. I'll bring up in the discussion. But the large differences really were driven by concerns over privacy. The only real difference here I saw across any of the experimental designs was for the preemptive for the offer of preemptive control. For those with privacy concerns, they were less likely to participate. Otherwise, there was no variation across any of the experimental design here. And this is reiterated through a logistic regression that I put in the paper if you want to see some more information on this. But overall, the offers of control that I gave based off of the literature and how we've seen it presented in the past had no impact on participation. I did see incredibly high willingness to participate, so that could be built into it. I'm already working with a panel that's used to being invited to such surveys. There's a lot playing in there. This was restricted to individuals on their smartphones, so we assume they're invited to surveys, they're familiar with smartphones. There's also a study timing here. This is 2 years and plus after the last data collection that I could find in the literature. And there's a lot of evidence in the literature that suggests that being invited or being aware of studies similar to this would help to, increase willingness for your participation in a current environment. And there is this split here where I tell people on the next screen, once they say yes, they will have the app to download, but they never actually have to do it. So we could have seen some drop off there that I just cannot observe based off of this. So I will stop here since my time is done. I did ask for an open response as to why participants did not participate if they chose not to, and I'm happy to show that if there's questions about that as well.